Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Thursday, June 13th. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris here with you. On this episode, we dig into a recent piece that Eno wrote for The Athletic, looking at a few buy low targets, guys you might want to be trading for on the hitting side in particular. We've also got a few fool's gold buy lows, the don't buy lows, as we're calling them, that we'll give you some warnings about. We're going to take a look at a few mailbag questions, including one about Pablo López and his underperformance up to this point in the season. And as we do each and every Thursday, we'll take a look ahead to a few interesting names that you might be considering as pickups for the weekend waiver preview. You know, how's it going for you on this Thursday?
It's good. I'm finally on the other side of that illness. Took the kids to the Dutch Goose and played some pool, and they hit some nice shots. I had to beat them in the end, of course.
Yeah, they're at the age now where I think you just have to play it out, right? You can't really let kids at that age win.
No, especially not the 9-year-old, because he's insufferable about losing. So I have to teach him how to lose, or else he's just going to keep doing this.
Yeah, he'll be flipping tables over and just doing stuff forever. So yeah,
he was okay with. We played Cutthroat, where it's the three of you. And he was okay with it getting down to me versus him for the last ball.
So just not being in last that's a step in the right direction towards learning
beating
how to
his brother
losing.
At least.
Yes, there's one win built in there. If you're looking for a small win for yourself, join our Discord. The link is in the show description. Lots of lively chatter going on in there. It's a good place to send mailbag questions. It's easy for us to track them in there. But, let's start getting into your hitters to target via trade. And, you had a bigger leaderboard at the top of the piece. You kind of focused on 5 particular players that you really like. I think the rubric you used for this made a lot of sense. You were looking for players with below league average results so far, but good swing decisions, looking at swing percentage outside the zone and subtracting chases, swings from outside the zone, looking at guys who are lifting the ball with hard contact, so barrels, and of course guys that were hitting everything hard, just hard hit rate. So good rubric overall here to focus on as you're looking for the players to go after. And I think the name that most people are frustrated with right now that made this piece was an early round pick, looked like a high floor guy, and he's probably one of the least discussed early round picks of anybody going inside the top 30 this year. It's Austin Riley. And we've talked about him as a guy that had a lengthy absence where he didn't go on the IL. So that added to the frustration where it looked like he was day-to-day, and clearly he needed more time than the Braves realized initially. He's sitting for the season now with a 225, 295, 338 line and 3 homers through 52 games. This is a guy that's popped more than 30 homers each of the last 3 seasons, and he's done it with excellent run production as a key producer in the Atlanta lineup. So what kind of bounce back are we expecting? Is it a full bounce back? Is it even just 90% of what we're used to from Riley? I'm curious what you see in like the next 3.5 months from him, because he's one of the bigger underperformers from the early rounds so far.
Yeah, I mean, the difference between his career pull rate and his current one is, 41 and 38. 38's his current one. So I think Austin Riley's just searching for that contact point, and just a really, we're talking half inches, at most. Like he's just an inch off, I feel like. And in terms of hitting the ball hard, yeah, he's had other seasons where he's hit the ball harder, I guess. He's had for the last 3 years, he's been clear of 114, and this year it's 113.5. But 113.5 is still hitting the ball damn hard. And yeah, his barrel rate's been over 13% for the last 3 years, and it's 10.7 right now. I think that's the kind of thing where it just irons itself out. So I think going forward, you could expect him to hit 275 with 30 homer pace. You have to, so he won't end up with 30 homers. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it might end up with 20 if everything goes really well.
Yeah, and I don't really know why he goes out, and I don't really know, what this means for his future. Although I will say he's an incredibly streaky guy for not having the worst K rate. He's not, doesn't have the Gallo or Adele type K rate, but he does kind of have a little bit of their streakiness. And I think, while he's still under 30 years old, you can expect that Austin Riley will just have these white hot months and he'll get to 25 homers at least most years. I kind of think he'll still get there this year, even though the Bat X and ATC, the most bullish on him, and they say he'll get to 24. If he gets to 25 homers, he'll get to those numbers eventually. It's just like he's going to give you a month every year or 2 months every year where you're like, does he know how to hit? And I don't think that goes away until he's 31, 32, 33, where like sometime in there, he just can't get it back going again, but I don't think he's there yet.
Yeah, so much still looks like it's in line with the good versions of Riley. That's why I think it's so easy to kind of talk yourself into him as someone you'd go after. You're trying to find that power boost, trying to make up some ground in runs and RBIs, and do it with someone that might even help you in batting average along the way. Austin Riley ticks all those boxes. And I think, you wrote about Julio Rodríguez as well. I think it's easier to convince someone to trade a player like Riley than it is to trade Rodríguez, even though they're both great players. They're both early round picks. I think there's always the FOMO when it's more of a 5-category contribution, right? You expected 30-30 production from Julio Rodríguez, and you also expected the possibility, at least, of another step forward somewhere, whether that was more bags because he was on base more often, one more notch of power because he hits the ball so hard, so consistently, or better swing decisions, maybe bumping up the slash line as a whole. Like any one of those things or a combination of those things seemed possible at the beginning of the season. And it's not quite as grim as the start has been for Riley because Julio Rodríguez is 16 for 20 as a base stealer, has popped the 5 homers. He's not hurting you in average, hitting 268. It's just not what you expected for someone who was consistently going in the top 5 in redraft leagues.
Yeah. I think with Julio Rodríguez, like it's another thing where, why is he so streaky? And I just tend to think that it takes him a second to figure out how to attack the most recent book on him. And this year, what we're seeing is a lot more fastballs low and in. And I think that they're filling him up with both 4-seamers and 2-seamers low and in. And so he ends up kind of pulling those on the ground or slicing them to the opposite field in kind of a harmless way. And I can't think that he won't get out of that. He was so blinding hot the second halves of both of the last years. I don't know why it seems like he's a second half player, but that's another thing I wouldn't bet on happening going forward either. That's just hasn't been proven to be predictive in any way, like how you do in the first half versus the second half. Mark Teixeira aside.
There's always an exception.
Yeah, there's always one guy who just keeps that going his whole career. But Julio Rodríguez still a 50% hard hit rate, a 114 max EV, and an 8% barrel rate. Like when he makes contact, the contact is usually powerful, if not exactly where he wants to do it. 42% barrel rate, pull percentage the last 2 years for Julio Rodríguez, 34 right now. This is really the common thread among all the guys that I profiled. Was they're hitting the ball hard, but their contact point, as evidenced by their pull rate, is out of whack. And the one you could see it the most on was Dansby Swanson, who is pulling balls down the heart of the plate, pulling fastballs that are middle on the ground. And those are the balls you're supposed to hit hard. And in fact, a lot of those you're supposed to maybe even go the opposite way so that when you catch a slider there, you pull it and you pull it for power. That's at least a philosophy of a lot of people. So if he's pulling the fastball there, he's out in front. He's got a pull rate, Dansby Swanson does, that's not in line with anything he's ever done before. And what we saw over the weekend was a little bit of more center, power alley to power alley instead of down the line, a little bit of the maybe of the softening of that pull percentage. He is playing around with that contact point, and I fully expect him actually to have a stretch where he hits 275 and hits you 8 homers over 2 months, and then all of a sudden he's right in line to finish the season with like a 250 batting average and 20 plus homers and, you know, close to 10 steals. And that's what you wanted him for in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, kind of one of those metronome players, as we call him, where he helps you in pretty much every category. Maybe he's a little bit of a mediocre contributor in the batting average department. That seems to be the low end of his categorical contributions. But because he plays every day, because the lineup is at least kind of an average sort of lineup too, he's a good source of all the counting stats as well. So I think Dansby Swanson makes a ton of sense as a good player to target because the floor is so high, and a lot of those other aspects we care about are going where they normally do. The swing decisions are generally good, right? That pull rate is not accompanied by chasing stuff outside the zone. If you see something like that, then you might be a little more reluctant to target somebody as an actual buy low. I think you had this other board that we should put up here. It's the don't buy lows. And I'm curious what your rubric was here. What's the difference? Like what's
the rubric, it was really powerful. I was kind of surprised by it. The on the other side for the buy lows, when I just looked at people that made good swing decisions, barreled the ball and hard hit the ball, and were below league average last year, every single one of them improved in the second half. And the average WRC plus went from 85 to 125.
Wow.
So I felt like it was a really strong rubric. I thought, well, why don't we turn it around the other way and look at people who are below average with a stick right now and making poor swing decisions, not hitting the ball in the air hard but in barrel rate, and not hitting the ball hard in general. You'll see some green on this, but the green is relative. So all of the people on this list do not make good swing decisions, have not hit the barrel, and have not hard hit. So, you know, if there's green on there, it's just relative to the rest. I think it's still useful to have that coloring because Nolan Arenado is red across the board. The only thing that he's doing right now is making contact. And I know he's pretty close to league average, but I think he's not anywhere close to where he used to be. He never was a great barreler, but I continue to think that Nolan Arenado is a poor buy low. We'll see if, you know, I've seen some percolation, but I feel pretty confident in that call. The hardest one, the one that hurts me the most in my heart, is Evan Carter being on here. I was a big fan of Evan Carter going into the season. The quality of the contact for him is closer in green, meaning he's below average, but he's not as below average as a lot of guys on this list. He makes the best swing decisions on this list, just a little bit too passive to be above average. He has a 5.9% barrel rate. That's bad, but it's not as bad as it gets on this list. And he has a 32% hard hit rate, you know, around 39% is league average. Obviously, the quality contact's there. The 26.5% strikeout rate for Evan Carter is not good. I can't really hold on to any one thing that says he's going to be good, except that he still has that good eye. They're still playing him. He still has an interesting skill set. I think he's an okay buy low in keeper leagues, even if he's not an okay buy low in redraft leagues.
So, yeah, I think the tricky thing about this particular board is the younger players on the list. Carter is probably, if not the youngest, he's near that distinction of this group. It's very hard to look at players who are in the early days of their career, the first half season of their career, at least by total plate appearances, and to say, well, I'm out on this guy because it's not working right away. It's like, well, no, there's a growth here. This is the foundation, and then where do we go from here? I mean, on the Wednesday show, Keith Lodge, we were talking about Colt Keith, and I think we saw some of that month-to-month improvement from Colt Keith from April to May, and he's kind of slumping again in June. But one of the things I put out there yesterday was maybe we just have to be a lot more patient because of the quality of pitching around the league being generally higher and some other challenges in the run environment. We're going to explore a few of those on Friday as well. Like there's more going on here than we've previously thought as far as things that are working against hitters right now. And I think
that's true.
Our patience has to be more in line, at least with the organization's patience. I think the Rangers look at Evan Carter when healthy and say, we need him to figure this out. When he comes back, we need him to be a part of our lineup because the next option up isn't necessarily better. And Evan Carter is such an important part of their long-term future.
Yeah, just on that first point about, you know, what the challenges hitters face today, young hitters, I just had a tweet yesterday. There are 4 starting pitchers in AAA that have not played in the big leagues yet that have above average stuff and above average locations. Those 4 starters are David Festa, Shane Baz, Will Warren, and Andrew Bash. 4.
And one of those pitched in the big leagues previously before he got hurt. He hasn't pitched
That's
in the big
right.
leagues this year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, even that, it's like, it's kind of a rehab.
He's kind of on his way up, too. So, really, there are 3 guys, and Will Warren had a 101 location and 101 stuff. So, it's like, okay, like, yeah, but, that's not like standout. And so, if you are a hitter in AAA right now, you're not seeing the best of the best. Like, you're not seeing the best prospects. And so, somebody brought this up in the context of the Cubs, that we've seen some of the Cubs hitting prospects hit really well on their way up and then and struggle at the big leagues. And I think that's part of the story. What we've seen with Cole Keith this year is that it started out pretty poorly. And in fact, he looks okay on this because zone minus chase is the average is 39 and Cole Keith says a 35. The average barrel rate is around 8 and he's got a 6.8. The average hard hit is 39. He's got a 35.8. So in fact, him being so close to all those things and having a good K percentage, I'm just, it's not even a buy low. It's just like he's a buy for me because I think he'll be better in the second half. And then better going forward. The only thing that I would say is I'm not sure what his ceiling looks like and that he may not be a 10 or 12 team player, but, like guys like Carter, Beatty, Corbin Carroll is on this list. Ceddanne Rafaela, Colt Keith, Gabriel Moreno. I still consider them guys that I would be attracted to in keeper leagues, even if I don't want to buy them this year. I was a little surprised to see Corbin Carroll on here, but we know the quality of the contact hasn't been there. And I kind of assume it'll come back at some point, but him being on this list is a little bit eye-opening for me because he could just struggle all year this year and just have a really bad year and still have a good career. Sometimes people take a whole year to get it back again.
Yeah, Corbin Carroll right now, if you look at a past calendar year leaderboard, has hit 14 homers and stolen 46 bases in his last calendar year. It's 158 games, 102 runs scored, 63 RBIs, sub 20% K rate during that span. But it is only a 244, 321, 391 line. Much better for fantasy purposes than for real life purposes. It's like league average, even a tick below. Similar players, at least in terms of power and slash line, that are in this range. I guess Dansby Swanson kind of fits, a little more power, a lot less speed, but 231, 305, 406. I mean, like, it's not, Corbin Carroll hasn't cratered to the point where he is without value. He's just at a really difficult spot for us to decide, like, do we think he's clear by low, or is he hiding an injury or playing through something? Like, those questions are still unanswered. They're still things we just can't quite figure out.
Bat speed metrics, it looked like he's healthy, but I think there is an open question. I think even with the barrel and max EVs that he's showed so far, he could still be like a 15 to 18 homer hitter in a good true talent season. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if he is that, and he's kind of even slowed down a little bit with the legs, So if he's already slowing down with the legs and, true talent next year, you're kind of projecting him for 14 homers and 25 steals and a 250 average. That puts him in a different class than he's been in.
What's pretty interesting is on the same past calendar year leaderboard, CJ Abrams has 23 home runs to Corbin Carroll's 14. He has 51 steals to Carroll's 46. A similar strikeout rate, 19.1%. Carroll walks more, but CJ Abrams has been better. He's been about 5% better than league average over the past calendar year. And I realize these are kind of arbitrary endpoints, just diving back in, but I think that rolling 1 year leaderboard gives us maybe a more complete snapshot of how things are going in the long run as opposed to how things have been going for the first 2.5 months.
It also makes me pine for some bat metrics that we don't have in terms of bat shape. I mean, we Corbin Carroll talking about, getting too flat and what that has done for him and his power. And then just thinking of the way that CJ Abrams swings. There's got to be different swing shapes that are just more ready for power, more suited for power. Maybe if we knew a little bit more about their swing shapes, we would know what they're doing going forward. Luis Camposano being on this list doesn't bother me so much because he's a catcher and he has a 13% strikeout rate. And if I own Luis Camposano, it is because he's a catcher and he has a 13% strikeout rate.
Plays a lot. Yeah. Catcher 2 in a 2-catcher league works out fine. I thought there might be one more level there. Maybe he'll get there someday, but it doesn't necessarily look like it's happening right now.
But if you're a veteran on this list, then I'm really worried about you. I mean, Anthony Rizzo, I don't think that there is something to point to. And in fact, somebody asked me about a hitter named Bo Rice or Ben Rice.
Ben Rice.
Huh?
Ben Rice?
Ben Rice is a 25-year-old AAA hitter for the Yankees that's 35 future value by the prospectors. But given that they're probably saying because his field is 30-30 and he used to be a catcher, they're saying he's not a catcher. He's a first baseman, so he has a big bar to overcome. Well, right now he's got a 258 WRC plus in AAA, coming off a 152 in AA. He just got promoted. And there's more talk now that he is the eventual replacement for Rizzo. Got a double-digit walk rate, not bad strikeout rates, swing strike rates, 62% hard hit rate right now in AAA. I guess Ben Rice could be knocking on the door. It seems like something that I wouldn't think the Yankees would do is like DFA Anthony Rizzo when the offense is going that well and he's a credible veteran. But he's on this list of not really doing anything well other than not striking out. And he's got a 78 WRC plus. Some projections have him as low as a 105 WRC plus, and that would be kind of league average-ish. So I don't know. Think of that name, Ben Rice, as a 25-year-old first baseman. FanGraphs and a lot of other prospect lists are not going to like him. But it is still the type of player that might come into New York and just take full advantage of the short porch.
Yeah, I think that's a great kind of prospect of the week, just thrown in there in passing. I don't know if they'll make that change. It is the final year of the 2-year deal that Rizzo signed, and they do have a club option on him, but he do the same 1-year leaderboard trick. And we know Anthony Rizzo suffered that concussion last season in May, tried to play through it for a little while. He hasn't been the same player since then. He's got 8 homers in his last 104 games, 214, 287, 309. It's a 73 WRC plus of players with 300 or more plate appearances in the last calendar year. That ranks 262nd out of 279. So unfortunately, it just looks like it's a health-related decline with Rizzo. And, whether it's going to Ben Rice or trading for another first base option, it seems like a spot the Yankees will try and upgrade at some point in the next 6 or 7 weeks, given the ongoing struggles of Rizzo. I had a question for you about MJ Melendez again. I think we've maybe kicked this idea around before, but he continues to pop. You didn't write about him, which I think was a good choice. I think leaving him out of the 5 players he featured in the article, even though he was on the leaderboard, even though he met the criteria, because we've seen this before. It just reminds me of that line in Moneyball. If he's a good hitter, why doesn't he hit better? Right? Like there's like something is wrong. And it just made me think, is this the opposite of Isaac Paredes, where projections keep telling us one thing and performance keeps lagging underneath that? And, just as you could have something you do that the projections don't capture that's good, like Paredes with the pulled fly ball extreme tendencies that lead him to more power, maybe there's something going on with MJ Melendez that, I don't know, continues to drive his average on balls in play down. He was at 311 last year and still only hit 235. And for his career, he's a 269 BABIP guy and a 216 hitter. It really seems like MJ Melendez should get so much more out of his approach and his batted ball quality that he does. Even though I don't have the exact answer for why it's not working, I'm starting to think he fits into this group of projections say he's good, but we've seen enough to know that he's not quite as good as the projections say. And because of where he falls in the player pool, he's actually been much more droppable or less rosterable than we've thought for the better part of the last year, even though we've kept looking at him as someone we should hold on to.
Yeah, I mean, I've been holding on to him in some of my 15 teamers just as like a reserve outfielder that I can put in there when I need to. And even that seems like a stretch these days. I've been watching some of his at bats, and like honestly, he just looks a little lost out there. It seems like A swings when he should be doing P swings, and just not a great sense of the zone, even though his chase rate's not big. I don't know. It's so hard to put my finger on. I mean, there's like the reactionary crowd that's just like, no, he just sucks.
No, he does some things well. It just it doesn't click. It's the sum of the parts are somehow worse than the individual parts.
It is. It's really, really weird. For his career, 26% strikeout rate for MJ Melendez, 11% walk rate, and a 11% barrel rate, and a max EV of 113. Like, if you just put those numbers together for a different player, I think you would have better than a 216 average and a 386 slug.
As a hitter only, is it like a Dalton Varsho profile? We keep looking for more and not getting more, and
he is a very extreme pull hitter. And I can't tell him not to pull because, you know, with those batted ball exit velos on some level, you're like, yeah, you should be a power hitter. But you look at his spray chart and it's really pull. So I wonder if there's also a little bit of like trying to be a power hitter in a park that's not really going to help you. You know?
Could be some of it, yeah.
And then on top of that, when you have a 47% pull rate, I think you're pretty obvious in terms of what you want. You want on the inner half, you know? And so what I've seen are at bats where pitchers are like pitching him in off of the inner half so that he just pounds it in the ground foul or you know, pulls it in the ground. And then getting him like soft away where he's just right over the top of it. So something about his approach right now is too obvious. And I bet you that's what it is. The thing that Paredes does, in fact, it flips what Paredes does on its back, right? What does Paredes do that is so cool is he has like 3 different batted ball speeds, and he picks his spots, and he seems actually kind of hard to pitch to. Surprisingly hard to pitch to, given that he doesn't hit the ball 115 miles an hour, you know? And I think Melendez might be the opposite of that, where it's like very obvious what he wants to do. And you can figure out how to pitch to him.
You can avoid the worst possible damage because he's too predictable in his intent, even though he understands ball strike really well, has the eye, but doesn't necessarily have a malleable plan. I guess that would be the way you'd try to articulate it a little bit. But yeah, it's weird because he keeps coming up on lists and different things as someone who's doing a lot of things right, and every time we check in, it's still just more of the same, or in this case, a little worse. The
defense is also not very good, and I lied a little bit when I said that the rubric that I came up with was undefeated. What the asterisk is that 2 of the players that were in my field from last year didn't play in the second half. So everybody that played improved. And one of the people that didn't play in the second half was Edward Olivares.
Oh.
And Olivares got a lot of crap, or the Royals got a lot of crap from people in our sphere about not just playing Edward Olivares. Free Edward Olivares. Why is he up and down again? And like part of the story is kind of a little bit similar to Olivares, to Melendez, which was not great defense, and we're just not sure the offense is good enough to float that not great defense. And the closer Melendez comes to being classified in that boat, the closer he gets to being sent down.
The good news from Melendez, the defense has become a little bit better. I think he's like a -1 by outs above average. His arm's pretty good. So that helps. I think he's got I don't remember, I saw the full leaderboard, but I think he's got quite a few outfield assists. I think there's a reputation maybe that you can take extra bases on him, and that always creates an opportunity to kind of counteract that and say, nope, you can't. I'm gonna take advantage of you running on me and pad my stats that way. So at least there's some improvement defensively.
Yeah, he should have an arm, former catcher.
Yeah, but wow, 51 WRC plus, walking less. just not doing it consistently. It's been pretty maddening because in a few deeper leagues, I thought it was going to fall into place for MJ Melendez. Let's get to some mailbag questions. First one comes in our Discord from Slam the Flap. That is a reference to a Mitch Hedberg joke from probably 20 or so years ago, but I got it and I love it. Slam the Flap wants to know what's happening with Pablo Lopez.
I don't think anything really is out of order. When you look across his line, the big difference is just a few homers that he hasn't given up in the past. And that's the biggest source of noise just from a traditional standpoint in pitcher metrics is short-term, power eruptions. It's just not predictive in any way. Home runs per 9 does not become predictive until you're like 80% of the way through the season. So that's the big thing that I see. I don't think there's much else going on. Stuff Plus says that maybe the changeup isn't as good as the past, but given Stuff Plus ratings with changeups, I'm willing to consider that a wash, and that he still has his good slider, still has a pretty good curveball. I think the changeup is probably still plus, and both his fastballs rate as average or above. So I don't really see a problem here.
Yeah, I wonder if there was maybe a stretch where he was tipping pitches or something else was going on, because
being predictable in his pitch mix decisions.
Yeah, and it's weird because he's got 5 and he's using the same mix as last year. If you look at the distribution and you toggle from 23 to 24, it barely moves. It's almost identical in terms of usage, velocity, all of it. It looks like more of the same. Could easily shave a 1.5, 2 runs off his ERA between now and the end of the season, and it would not be surprising. 5 years in a row now, counting this season, Pablo Lopez has had a Sierra under 4. And this is actually the best Sierra he's ever posted, with an ERA that's as bad as it's ever been. So I think as far as your higher end pitchers that you'd possibly trade for, if we're kind of looking for some guys that fit into that description, Lopez might be a little more gettable. Maybe whoever has Lopez in your league found enough other pitching elsewhere that they're willing to part with Lopez and get a nice hitter back in return. I would have no reservations about trading for him if I was trying to add pitching right now.
I would like to see him maybe go back to using the sinker more against righties. The one thing that you can see is that he had like a bit of a peak of sinker usage in early April, early May, that he's kind of fallen off of since. I think the sinker is a good pitch for him against righties. And so I'd like to see him return to using that. When he did use those against New York and Seattle in early May, he was pretty close to like a 25, 25, 25, 25 guy in terms of, you don't really know what's coming. I got 4 pitches.
I want that so bad.
Yeah. And I think that could be good for him. And I know it's a little bit different lefty righty, but even then what you end up being is kind of a 30-30-30 guy against lefties against righties. It's just a slightly different mix.
I mean, I want to cut the pizza into 6 slices if I can. Like, give me 16, 16, 16, and then 16, 16, 16. Like, you're pure.
You want yourself mode. A Chris Bassett is what you want.
Well, because I could see if I had the chops anything close to the chops to be a pitcher, I think that's the type of pitcher I would have become. Because I never would have had overpowering stuff. I never could have been a Paul Skeens. Maybe I could have been a Chris Bassett. So that's why I just want that. It's like, well, it's more attainable. You could work really, really hard and maybe become a Bassett. I think you need a little bit of good fortune, a little bit of positive genes to also, you need that to be Bassett too. But you need even more to be Paul Skeens.
Yeah.
Peter wants to know, how do you track players you're watching on FanGraphs, custom leaderboards, watch list tools? Like what's your way of functioning within that universe for tracking players?
I don't really.
You don't use it that way. I do use it that way sometimes. I'll create a custom leaderboard of players, use the dashboard stats. I do like to have my own dashboard. We've talked about some of the things we'd like to have on there. I think mine right now for pitching is innings, ERA, WHIP. It's all the roto categories, right? Like that's that in the first block, and then I got Sierra, strikeout and walk rate, swinging strike. I like zone contact just to see if it changes a lot from year to year. You're getting hit more in the zone, getting hit less in the zone. I think that's kind of important. CSW's on there, hard hit percentage. I do have home run rate on there, looking again for year to year volatility, and then batted ball distribution. Fly ball, line drive, ground ball. I just like to see that stuff and see how it's relating to everything else that's going on. So I do like the custom leaderboards. I think you do have to have a membership for FanGraphs to put more than 10 players on there, if I'm not mistaken. I thought I saw someone mention that in Discord, but it's worth every penny. I think I'm on the site half the day, every day anyway. So it's an invaluable tool for me, but I think a lot of people could find ways to make it work well. And the watch list,
like watch list players, my big problem is that I'm watching everybody.
Yeah, I think I've tried to use it in the past for like deeper leagues that I play in. I just use it as an easier way to save a dozen players that I'm going to look at again in a month to see how they're performing, right? That way I don't have to open up 12 individual player pages. I find that to be useful. So it's a custom leaderboard that you hit save on once you put the custom players in. The downside, if there is a downside, is that if you are trying to track players in your league who might be on the waiver wire, if someone else picks them up, there's no way to automatically remove them from your list. You have to manually control who's on the list. That's the only
right. Even the watch lists on CBS and Yahoo, where you just have to click the little like watch icon, and I feel like I click those icons a lot, being like, oh yeah, I'm gonna keep an eye on this guy, and then I don't think I ever sort it. Be like, let me see my watch list. It just goes away. I guess what's nice on Autonew is that if you click somebody that as a watch list person, when they come up for auction on the front page, they're highlighted.
Yeah, it tells. Yes, it
so you can be like, oh, this is somebody I was interested in at some point. Maybe I should take a closer look.
Yeah. So that's how I'm using the FanGraphs custom tools for tracking players. Hopefully that helps you in some way, Peter. One more question here. Matt wanted to know, is it better for the Dodgers to target a shortstop leading into the trade deadline than to actually add an outfielder, right? Because you could move Mookie Betts back into the outfield. And I think there's kind of a few questions layered in there. There was also a specific question about Bo Bichette being the target. And I thought, if you're trading for a shortstop, is that really what you want? Even if you believe in Bo Bichette as a hitter, do you like Bo Bichette enough defensively to trade for him and then move Mookie back to another position?
Last time I checked outs above average, Mookie wasn't great. Let me see where he is right now. Yeah, 261 out of 267.
Right. It's going about as well as you'd expect for a guy playing the position really for the first time on a regular basis at age 31. Which
it's passable.
It's amazing that he's doing it.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that it's like the necessarily like best configuration for them as a team.
My only problem with this is such that normally shortstops cost more. So what I found in my league where we drafted Mookie Betts and Xander Bogaerts, and then when we lost Xander Bogaerts, Mookie Betts ended up at shortstop, and we've just found it easier to find new outfielders. So Mookie Betts is going to be our shortstop. You know what I mean? And I think that's going to be the same thing the Dodgers find on the market. Is it's a lot easier to find outfielders than it is to find a shortstop. I mean, I'm just looking through the teams. If you don't get Bo Bichette, there's not really. Do you want to put Paul DeJong at shortstop and move Mookie Betts off? Like, I don't know if that helps. You know,
that's not really the answer. And Bo is -4 by defensive runs saved and -2 by outs above average. So I mean, it's better than what you have. He's not a shortstop sort of conversation for me, but it's more of a how happy are you with that level given the cost? It's still probably going to cost a lot if Bo Bichette gets moved to acquire him, with more than a couple months left before he's a free agent.
Yeah, the Bo Bichette thing is really interesting from a lot of angles. Will the Blue Jays sell when they're so close to 500? Having the record the Blue Jays have right now in the National League would put them directly in the hunt for the second wild card. I think they would be 3 games out.
Yeah.
But in their division, they're in 4th, and they seem pretty solidly 4th. Like, could they leapfrog the Red Sox and be 3rd? Yes. Would that necessarily make them the second wild card? No, because the Royals are playing well, the Twins are playing well, and the Rangers haven't gotten going yet, and the Astros too. So I tend to think they won't sell because there is still that glimmer of a chance of the second wild card. They play better at times. They could say Springer's going to get going. If they take Bo Bichette off of the market, or it never gets on the market, I don't really see another shortstop that's available that moves the needle for the Dodgers. Who am I missing? Is there somebody? But the Rockies aren't trading Tovar.
No.
Would the D-backs trade Perdomo, and would that really move the needle?
You'd have, I think, a better defender if that's your priority. And I think, Miguel Marojas being old does not afford you the opportunity to just play the all-glove guy, because I'm not sure at this stage of his career he even fits that description. So, yeah, it's a tough position to fill on the fly. It's a little strange when one of the best, if not the best organization in baseball doesn't have that position solved. But when you're good everywhere else, it's okay to have a weakness. I guess it doesn't matter as much in the grand scheme of things.
I have one name. Is this intense? Francisco Lindor?
Oh, I'm listening.
I mean, do they have more money?
They do not have more money, but hold on a second. Here's the thing. We have already seen the Mets being willing to pay down contracts. I think I kicked this out there last year at the trade deadline. I said, hey, what about Lindor before he gets into the later part of his career? I mean, he's signed through 2031, a made-up year. But it's only 2024. There's a lot of time left in this deal.
How long do you want him to be at shortstop, I guess, is the question.
I think if you're the Dodgers...
he's still 8th and outs above average.
I think if you're the Dodgers, you're absolutely interested. I think if you're the Mets, like, what are you clinging to? You're
clinging to the idea that, that what their owner said, that like we're going to be in the World Series in the next 3 years or something, and you're saying we're cleaning up all the player development stuff on the back end. We're starting to turn out there. I think they are, like Christian Scott, like is an eye opener for me. Like they're starting to turn out guys. McGill looks like the best he's ever been. So if they're starting to turn out arms, then you say, hey, we could turn this around on the quick. And we'd rather have Lindor and sign someone next year. What if they sign Soto and it's Soto Lindor in the middle of the lineup, and they sign Alonso, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, this team can score, and now they're turning out arms. I think it may be delusional, but there may be a self-delusional aspect to this where they say, we're going to be competitive in this Lindor window, so we'd rather have that locked down.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's a question of the details. What if the Mets only have to pay down $50 million of it, and they get out of the rest of it, and they still get a prospect they like out of it?
Well, that's the thing. That's the bin you'd want to shop in too. Is you'd say, hey, like the Dodgers prospects, yeah, I can. Josue DePaula, like I could go try and make a move for him if I pay down some of this, and I can add some pitching.
Dodgers
add Dalton Rushing.
Jose DePaula, Paula has been a total revelation, but the Dodgers will be like, well, we're not super attached to him. Like he's a 19-year-old that, just came out of nowhere. So he's not, let's go, why not?
Yeah, I think that's your pie in the sky best shortstop that could be traded, and it's not impossible, but it's still not likely. It's fun to think about, and I think there's a short list of teams that would be able to take on a large portion of what's left in that contract, and the Dodgers are on that short list, and they have a need. So,
if the Guardians were bad, I think they might have a couple shortstop options they could trade, because they make this kind of shortstop over there. They manufacture shortstops, but they're good. So they're not trading any of these guys.
No. Thanks a lot for that question, Matt. The fun exercise to think about as the trade deadline approaches here in about 6 or so weeks. Let's move on to our weekend waiver preview. It seems like a slightly lighter week, at least as of Thursday. Things change very quickly from the time we do our weekend waiver preview until things actually run on Sunday. But a couple of hitters that stood out to me, as at least as far as getting opportunities, Spencer Horwitz and Tyler Soderstrom. Horwitz is playing a lot for the Blue Jays right now. He started 5 consecutive games, playing a lot of second base, going to pick up eligibility there, I think, with one more appearance there this season. I'm curious if we see like average power as a possibility, because it's good average, good OBP profile, non-zero speed. Now we're talking about multi-position eligibility and a prominent spot in a lineup that could get better and could heat up and at least be top 10 or possibly top 8 here on out. I don't think that's an unreasonable sort of ask for the Blue Jays. So what do you make of Horwitz as a guy that's been in the big leagues on occasion? This is his, I think, second opportunity. Last year we saw him 7.4% barrel rate. Not bad. Pretty good swing decisions. I hit the ball on the ground a lot in the brief time he was up, but it was only 44 plate appearances. So it wasn't much of a look for him last time around.
Yeah, I mean, other guys with max EVs similar to Horwitz, if you include his AAA, are Michael Garcia, Gleyber Torres, Andrew McCutchen. I think that describes the range of his power fairly well in terms of power upside. In terms of demonstrated power, he's been pretty close to league average. So I wouldn't give him the upper reaches of that. But in terms of, could he someday hit 18 to 21 homers? Yeah, I think so.
I think he can just get on base a lot and be a little bit of a catalyst for a lineup that needs one.
Yeah, it's an interesting switch to go from Cavan Biggio to this. I think what they wanted out of Cavan Biggio is kind of what Horwitz is doing. Walk a lot, maybe not have the most power, but have enough power, And Biggio just really struggled with that toggle between power and patience, I think.
Yeah, we never quite got the same per game power output that we did from that first season back in 2019. We know, live ball that year, but 16 homers in 100 games that year, also stole 14 bases. The weird thing, I remember talking about this with you because that was like the first year we did the pod. Cavan Biggio was really good in sweet spot percentage, which is the the launch angle range, like the optimal launch angle range to hit barrels, but he doesn't hit the ball hard enough to hit a lot of barrels. Like that was the missing ingredient. And now that we've seen him in the big leagues for so long, I don't know if that really leaves the door open for him to possibly get better. He doesn't chase. That's something he does at an elite level. He does not chase. So I wonder if the Dodgers have some kind of tweak in mind for him to possibly change his profile a little bit. I mean, if you don't do a lot of damage and you start to strike out as much as Biggio did this year, I understand why a team finally moves on. It's just you look like kind of a replacement level guy, and they need more than that. And
Horwitz could be very similar to Biggio, except for one key ingredient is that strikeout rate. Because one of the things that that strikeout rate does for Biggio is just remove from him the chances of putting a ball in play that could be, because he pulls the ball some and he can hit the ball, 109, 110. And so you're just removing lottery tickets when you strike out 28% of the time, because he's not a guy who does that regularly. So like a guy who lives above 110 and can hit the ball 115, and pulls the ball like that much, then you're okay with him swinging and missing some, because when he does it, it's more likely to be hit hard. But if a guy who can only hit the ball 110, you want him to put as many lottery tickets out there, because he's not going to hit 110 all the time. That's his max,
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I think deep leagues are still like, and only leagues, you still want to throw a dart, multi-position eligibility, not a better team, new coaches, new hitting instructors. You never know. Like he's not, Cavan Biggio is not completely boring, even though it never worked out quite the way we'd hoped for him in Toronto.
Yeah, I mean, like Don Mattingly is leading the hitting meetings in Toronto. But that's a pretty old school voice.
Yeah.
So I would say going from Don Mattingly to Van Scoyoc, the hitting instructor in LA, is probably one of the wider gaps.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The other player I threw on the board here was Tyler Soderstrom. And I thought Tyler Soderstrom was sneaky in our draft and hold leagues this winter as someone who would get an opportunity with the A's, pick up in-season catcher eligibility, and maybe take a step forward at the plate. And I think those things are all possible, but I do think the catcher eligibility might take a little longer because he's been up for 27 games in Oakland, and he's got one appearance as a catcher, which is not a good pace. That means, barring some kind of injury to Shea Langoliers, we're probably months away from catcher eligibility in season. But Soderstrom is playing a lot and moving up in the order, too. It looks like he's sort of settling in as a regular first base option for the A's.
Yeah, with Ryan Noda really taking a step back this year, there was an opening there, and he kind of fits the bill. I mean, he's very Ryan Noda-esque. What you talk about is a 30% strikeout rate, like a 10 to 12% walk rate, and a 12 to 15% barrel rate. And I think Soderstrom can do all those things. It's going to come with a poor batting average. It just seems to be that kind of a profile of player.
Yeah, I think it's sort of like deeper leagues. If you need power, that's
some places he came with the catcher designation. So
yeah, there's a few sites where he qualifies there. So keep that on the radar. We did talk about Adael Amador earlier in the week and Tyler Locklear. I actually think Tyler Locklear has a better floor right now in terms of what he's going to bring as a hitter. Amador is much more of a wild card as far as how quickly he'll adapt to big league pitching, making the leap from Double-A. But we talked about them a lot on the Monday episode, so no need to really rehash that here. I do think it's kind of now or never time, though. If you want to pick up Noelvi Marte as a waiver pickup and not have to trade for him, he's eligible to come off his suspension 2 weeks from today. So Thursday, June 27th would be his first game back if they activate him and decide to put him right in the lineup right away and don't send him down to AAA. And Marte is available in 47% of CBS leagues, 61% of RotoWire Online Championships, and 89% of NFBC main events, which I think speaks to the players in that league knowing you just can't hold guys that aren't playing, right? I think this will be the week where teams that have a roster spot to play with go ahead and add Noelvi Marte.
It's already a little bit late. So the way that I describe this is the Masataka Yoshida change in price over time. And this is just my team. So it's a sample of one, but I'm sure that if we looked at this across, it would fit. 2 weeks ago, I bought Masataka Yoshida in one league for $5 out of 1,000 because there was just he's feeling good, cleared to swing, gonna go in rehab soon, right? Last week in the main event, we bought Masataka Yoshida for $45 out of 1,000. So that's a 10% increase, 10 times increase. And that was, Masataka Yoshida is on rehab, which is what Noelvi Marte is on now.
Yeah, he's played a couple games already.
Yeah. So last week would have been the week to get Noelvi Marte. If you could, though, I mean, there's all like you have to have him on your bench for a week more, which has a cost associated with it itself. But if you're talking about just fab costs, last week would have been the time to get him for $5 or less. This week, I think you're going to have to pay $50+ because of what's happened with Kristen Encarnacion Strand is facing a decision on season-ending surgery. And then I think just, in terms of what's going on with the Reds, they aren't scoring enough to say no to Noelvi Marte.
No, it doesn't seem like they have the luxury right now. I mean, they're playing for their season. Like they're not buried by any stretch of the imagination, but they need to make up some ground. And I think it's pretty clear Noelvi Marte projects to give them an upgrade once he's back. So unless there's some sort of internal frustration over the suspension where they want to send him down to send a message, it's like the punishment is that's the message.
It has been served. Yeah,
it's been served. So I think you bring him back and say, let's go. You're going to be the regular third baseman. We want that power. We want that speed. And he was a fringe top 100 consideration by the time that draft season was winding down. I think he could be a big impact player. And he's still going to be cheaper this week than he would be if he's still available next weekend.
Right. So that's what I'm saying.
Don't think about this weekend. It's going to be really expensive because
you're talking
leading into it
10, 15, maybe 20% if he makes it to the week after that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the inflation. You go from like 5% to 10%, 15%, pretty quickly.
The other name I wanted to throw at you on the pitching side is Drew Thorpe. We didn't talk about him at the beginning of the week, but he came up and debuted against the Mariners, and I think overall was pretty good. One thing that caught my eye was that he had a couple of offerings that were high in terms of CSW in the debut. The changeup, I saw the unicorn description getting tossed out there for the changeup. I know when we talked about Thorpe the second time he was traded, some of the enthusiasm about him had slipped. I'm curious what you make of him coming off of his big league debut earlier this week. It was 2 runs, only 1 earned, 3 hits, 2 walks, 4 Ks in 5 innings. Ended up being a no decision because the White Sox bullpen did things that the White Sox bullpen often does.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of movement and velo profile, I can see why Stuff Plus doesn't love Drew Thorpe's changeup, but I'm willing to give him A+ elite changeup, not only because of the scouting grades, but also because of his command of it was pretty intense. Like he was able to dot the bottom of the zone with that changeup in ways that I think will give hitters some struggles. But on the flip side with Drew Thorpe, Cal Raleigh anticipated a changeup of his and smoked it for a double. And so it's not an unhittable pitch. And when you look at his fastball, it gets okay vertical movement. It has something like a 16.5, 17 induced vertical movement. What's the B for again?
Break.
There you go. Why did that one always screw me up? He has like a 17 IVB, which is above average-ish. But if you look at his slot, you can tell that there's nothing unanticipated about it. It's a slightly over the top slot, and it's a slightly riding fastball. And on top of it, it's 92. So I think the fastball is going to give him troubles. The cutter was 86. So I don't think it's, I think it's a little bit more of a gyro slider. I think he's a guy that has like 3 breaking balls more than a guy who has 2 fastballs, if you know what I mean. And so 3 breaking balls, of which the slider is probably the one that's above average, an elite changeup, and a poor fastball. I just get vibes of Michael Wacha. I don't know who else is like kind of a changeup first guy that has sometimes put good stuff around it, but Walker is really the one that stands.
I think Walker is a pretty good like current example. Marco Estrada, it was a straight change, but I think maybe he's another guy like that where it's a lot of floor, not a lot of ceiling, and when it goes wrong, it goes very wrong. But
Ronel Blanco,
okay,
but
like, those are
better command.
Usable. Those are usable pitchers, though.
Better command than Ronel Blanco.
Okay, that's not bad. I mean, how does he compare to say like Adam Mazur? Came up.
Yeah, I think I would take him over Adam Mazur. If I'm looking at what Adam Mazur brings to the table, the Padres young guy that came, Mazur also doesn't have a good fastball. His slider is very good, but he didn't demonstrate the same level of precision command. He generally has some control, but I think Mazur's going to be more up and down. Thorpe has something that he can build around a little bit more than I think Mazur does.
And a long runway to stay in the big leagues.
That's something Mazur also does not have. I mean, the Padres are getting better and better, and they're above 500 now. They are the #1 wild card. It's switching from who's going to help us to we know who's going to help us, and when everyone's healthy, they're the ones that are in.
Yeah, I think
it's something that you can actually see in their bullpen pretty quickly, because when you look at the Padres bullpen at the beginning of the season, it was oh, it's going to be Matsui and it's going to be this, it's going to be this. And, Morahan was like, we'll use him, we'll try to figure out what's going on. And now the end of the game is pretty well scripted for the Padres. It's Morahan, Suarez, and Estrada that really own the end innings for San Diego. And I think you have a similar sorting out process that happens in rotations where you're like, Mazur, you're up, you're helping us, but it's not like you're taking someone's job.
I know running a baseball team is difficult. What I can't figure out is how Jeremiah Estrada got outrighted off the 40-man by the Cubs, claimed by the Padres, and has turned the corner this quickly. And the Cubs didn't give Estrada a lot of looks. It was like 17 appearances split between 2022 and 2023. I know the results last year were bad. He walked almost as many guys as he struck out. He had like 4 homers and 10 2/3. But you're talking about a guy that's 25 years old that has really good stuff. I just don't know. I don't know how that happened.
I was on Chicago radio with Spiegel there, and he said that he asked somebody in the Cubs organization, and they paused and were sad audibly for a little bit, and then just said, well, the Padres taught him a splitter, which has been really key to his success. And I would just say, why didn't you? Not so much like the splitter specifically, which is, why didn't you keep a guy with that special of a fastball and try other things around that fastball rather than say, stuff plus must be wrong. We got, this guy can't figure it out, especially when you're having some trouble in your own bullpen. I mean, he was dropped at a time when it's not like they had figured out their bullpen.
No, there were a lot of questions. And I realize there are different times a year when you've got to make decisions. You got to add guys to the 40-man, and sometimes you just got to make that tough call. And this is end of last season, right? You got picked up off waivers on November 6th. So you're trying to put the pieces together, protect guys from Rule 5, and that's an opportunity. I think it's one of those times a year where there are transactions that don't necessarily jump off the page when they happen, but then you look back later and go, oh, that was a sharp move. That actually
it was probably something like, oh, we got to put Cade Horton on the 40-man or whatever, and let's just lose a reliever.
Right, just lose a reliever. And I mean, options, we've talked about that before, that can factor in. Does this player have options left or not? I thought Estrada still had 1 option year. Yeah, he's actually got 2 option years left. So it was about the 40-man. It was about space on the 40-man. But back to Mazur real quick. One last thing before we go. Here's an actionable piece of advice that I have. I think Randy Vasquez is ahead of Adam Mazur, not only in the model, but when I watch them pitch, Randy Vasquez is throwing his curveball harder and harder. It looks like an out pitch. He looks like he's figuring out how to put all the pieces together. He obviously has those pieces, and I just think he's further along as a starter and represents a higher floor for a winning team. I think Mazur goes down, Randy Vasquez stays. Yeah, having the options always helps too, but I think Vasquez also has options. It can be an ongoing battle. That's the good thing. Even if you get sent down in that battle, the margin's small enough where a bad outing or two could flip it.
But my quote unquote pick is Vasquez in this situation.
All right. There you have it. Randy Vasquez, Eno's pick over Adam Mazur in the back of the Padres rotation. We are going to go on our way out the door. A reminder, you can get a subscription to The Athletic at theathletic.com/ratesandbarrels. Find Eno on Twitter at EnoSaris. Find me at Derek Van Riper. Find the pod at Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Friday at 1 o'clock Eastern on our YouTube channel.
Thanks for listening.